TFA fam, what is going on? This is the DFS D-Gen Nation pod. First time saying that. This might be a new voice if you've only ever checked into the D-Gen Nation pod. I am Cody Kutzer. You can find me at CKutzerFF. Kind of trying to, fill the shoes of Ryan Williams here for the, at least temporarily for now. They're big shoes. But I do know the first thing I have to say is I am joined by Matty Buckets at Matty DFS, as well as the CEO of TFA Child Please, Kevin Still at Fantasy Rat 13. Boys, going to be talking some best ball tonight. Going to be talking about some top stacks. We kind of decided we would fill this out by going some high price stacks, some mid price, and low priced. But the first thing we want to get out of the way, and I'm glad you guys brought this up pre-show, is the difference in how you're attacking your roster construction, whether you're playing just like the standard 12-team kind of drafts, or if you're jumping into some of the tournaments. Matty, you were saying that you only do tournaments. Kev, I know you kind of sprinkle across all of them, so I'm excited to get your guys' thoughts on that. So let's talk a little bit, little construction, just the differences in how you're building these teams, and then we'll get into some of these stacks.
Yeah, so I'll start it off from the tournament perspective. I've always been a DFS mind, and I've never really got heavily into cash games in DFS, so that's just kind of trickled over into my best ball portfolio. I just have always focused on tournaments, and that's just kind of how my mindset works. I try to be a little bit contrarian wherever I can, and that's so like my game and approach just fits tournament builds. So that's just what I do. So probably the biggest takeaway from attacking tournaments and best ball as opposed to cash games is the stacking perspective, because you're really looking for monster upside weeks that can really separate you from the field. And a lot of people just like to take best available, and which that is completely fine if you're just playing a 12-man league where, it pays out first through third, and you're not looking to beat, thousands of other teams that have also stacked rosters. So yeah, stacking is way more important in tournaments, and we'll definitely talk about some. And yeah, it's just, really you have to be contrarian at some point, getting your builds to be a little bit different, whether it's pairing, if you have a bunch of Chiefs on your team and, a lot of people are going to have Chiefs stacked up, then maybe going with a contrarian second stack that not many people are going to have. That way maybe if that second stack goes off and nobody has a Chiefs paired with, like, let's say a Dolphins stack, those are like the top two of the top 5 offenses that year. Your team is going to be pretty good. So it's all about, best ball is all about weekly upside. Your 0-point guys do not matter. I've talked about this and I'll talk about it again. I would rather have a guy who scores 0 points one week and 30 points the next, as opposed to a guy who's going to give me 15 and 15 for the same 30-point total. Best ball, because when that guy scores 0, he's being replaced by somebody else who scored points. And when he scores 30, he's in your lineup. So you really scored more than 30 as a team. But if your guy's getting 15 and 15, there's likely a chance, maybe he's replacing somebody who got 12 points, whereas that 12 could have been combined with 30 to get you to 42 instead of 30. So yeah, it's all about weekly upside, and we'll talk about some stacks, but that's the biggest difference for me.
Kev, real quick before you jump in, Matty, how many different tournament teams, or I guess just how many entries are you typically doing by the time the season rolls around?
I'll probably have more this year just because I'm going to get started earlier than I normally have. And I've typically in the past have had probably 50 teams in like the tournaments that allow you to have 150. I'm going to try to get over the 100-team mark this year. That way, I can really spread out my exposure to more teams that I want to attack. And that way you can also kind of spread yourself away from injuries as well. Whereas if you're only playing like 10 teams and let's say you draft the guy on same guy on 7 of them, and he was like your 3rd round pick and he gets hurt, your portfolio is kind of busted. So it is very important to, try to spread out your portfolio and not go severely overweight on any individual player and do that by just playing more teams. And if, they have different price point tournaments too. So like I know they'll roll out $5 tournaments. There'll be $25 tournaments. There'll be $125 tournaments. So, if you want to play 100 teams in the $5, I would do that before spending $500 to play in like the 150 or the $25. That way you get more exposure and you have more combinations, and you still got a shot at good money. The tournaments still have good payouts up top, and you generally see some weaker competition in those low dollar fields, which we know is true in DFS too. So I definitely encourage you to, especially for first timers, just do more drafts at a cheaper price, because drafting is the fun part of fantasy football anyways, right? So, that's all you're doing in best ball is just drafting. So, you can't really beat that.
No, and I think I do think the one thing I like too about Underdog is the fact that the way that it allows you, because you can preset all of your rankings, and you can also set limits. So like if you want to, you could join 30 different drafts in one day, and you don't even have to draft any of them. You can allow it to auto draft for you, set limits for everything. So, you don't get 7 quarterbacks. And, if you set your rankings right and everything, like it pretty much does it by itself. You can also set limits on players and stuff like that and take players off the board. So, that's one thing I do really like. Underdog is by far, in my opinion, the best ball platform there is. I used to do MFL 10s and or best ball 10s, I guess now is what they call them. But now finally Underdog is in Missouri, so I can play Underdog. I've absolutely loved Underdog so far. I also think something smart too is if you're going to play tournaments as well, is getting in some like at certain point of times of the year, because obviously ADP is going to change drastically now, and you can get an edge. Maybe you're able to get a player a little bit earlier than what you normally would once August gets here, because when August gets here, we get all this information, and ADP is going to fluctuate wildly on preseason. There's going to be probably some guys that get hurt and go down with an injury, and so all of a sudden, if Ezekiel Elliott tears his ACL in training camp, then Tony Pollard all of a sudden, who you were getting in the 9th, 10th round now, who he's going to be a 2nd round pick in August. So there's different variables there. So I think spreading your exposure out to what your teams and everything else over a course of the offseason, I think is a smart move too. But I would go lighter, the earlier you are compared to in August, because I do think there's a big edge for the people that really dig in, that really do as much research on all this stuff and really are paying attention. There's still a pretty big edge in terms of roster construction and everything else if you draft in August, where you have all the information at hand.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's something I was actually talking with Cody about pre-show too, because really the what makes you a good player is you're able to digest the information available that at that point in time, and you can take that information you have and create better teams than everybody else based on that same information. So whether there's injuries or not injuries, being able to spread out your exposure to teams across the different points of the offseason, and being able to make informed decisions at those different points in time, that really helps you, like you said, level out your portfolio exposure to different players and situations as they arise.
Good stuff, fellas. Shout out to Walito rocking with us in the chat, hitting us with that $5 Canadian pristine super chat. We appreciate you, man. Ashton also rocking with us. Let's go ahead and just dive into some of these top stacks early on at this point. We are looking at Underdog ADP, like Kev was saying, with his favorite place to play. Like I said at the outset, we kind of broke this down by high-priced, mid-priced, and then cheap. So we're kind of looking at players for the high price that are in the rounds 1 to 4. Nothing is going to fit perfectly, especially, when you're looking at quarterbacks in this range, because there's only going to be a handful that are going here. Matty, I know you and I had some similar thoughts. You being the Cowboys fan, I'll leave that one for you. But the other one that we also both liked was the Chargers. Obviously, Herbert not going in the top 4 rounds, but he is going in the inside the 6th round on Underdog. And then you're looking at guys like Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen. Obviously, Eckler going around that 1-2 turn, typically more toward the early second. And then Keenan Allen is a third round pick. But I mean, they didn't bring anything else in terms of the pass catchers outside of Josh Palmer. Obviously, they're bringing back Mike Williams on his 5th-year option. Completely revamped that offensive line, bringing in guys like Slater, Matt Filer, Corey Linsley. So I really like this stack here, and we saw what Herbert was able to do. I think we're looking at Eckler and Keenan leading this team in targets as long as Eckler is able to stay healthy. And obviously that is going to be a theme, the same that it was last year. You're going to see it in best ball. You're going to see it in your redraft leagues by the time that August rolls around. But running backs are going to go hot and heavy, so you're going to have to snag Eckler, like I said, beginning of the second, typically where he's going. And then, Keenan Allen, just a PPR machine. And I really hope that we have made it past the Keenan Allen injury-prone bullshit tagline that he was, having to carry the weight of that for so long. Because I really don't think he's missed many games over the past 3 to 4 seasons. So, like I said, that offensive line looking good. I'm not worried about the new coaching staff they brought in. I really don't see too much changing in terms of how they're going to attack that offense. I mean, that defense is as good as it looks every single year. For whatever reason, that defense and that team as a whole just can't stay healthy. So I think we see the pass attempts and the target volume kind of remain the same. So the Chargers is an early high price stack that I like.
Yeah, I don't hate that either. And I mean, it sounds like there's a shot that they could get Julio Jones as well. He's kind of the big domino there. We're kind of waiting to see where he's going to end up here probably next. Or I think there's a pretty good chance where that trade's going to happen next week as soon as it's June 1st, and they can designate it as a post June 1st trade. And now with the stuff coming out with him being on live TV saying he's out of there, doesn't really help the situation either. But I do think there's a chance that that's where he could go. They're one of the few teams that actually have the cap space right now to be able to facilitate that trade. They're kind of a team that is obviously chasing the Chiefs. I don't mind that move for them because, if you have Justin Herbert, who is still on his rookie contract and, doing it right and maximizing that rookie contract. And, you can get Julio Jones in there for 2 years, why he still is under that contract. The offensive line is going to be a lot better. Like, I think that automatically, Mike Williams is on a 1-year deal anyways. They picked up his 5th-year option, and this will likely be his final year with the Chargers. So, Julio, Keenan Allen could be a lot of fun as well. Some shootouts there in the AFC West with this division could get really wild too if the Broncos trade for Aaron Rodgers. Could you imagine that? Aaron Rodgers with the Broncos, Pat Mahomes, and then Justin Herbert with Julio and Keenan Allen?
Filthy. Like we've said before too, that's also a division with solid defensive play as well. So that would just be good football all around. Walito, you need to pump the brakes on Julio to Tennessee. Why do you want that? I want Julio to have more than 100 targets. So you need to pipe down, sir. Kev, we know who you're going to talk about. Matty, why don't you go ahead and jump in on the aforementioned Cowboy stack?
Yeah, and I will just note on Herbert too. The biggest thing for me on them is they address their offensive line issues. Drafting Slater and brought in Linsley from Green Bay. So definitely a big boost to him in that regard as well. Keep him healthy. Keep him not have what happened to Joe Burrow happen to Herbert. So they definitely have the weapons there in LA. So I definitely love that. But yeah, the clear number one for me is Dallas. I mean, they didn't really do anything to address their defensive issues. And I mean, there's not really much they could have done because that's just how bad they were last year. I mean, they are going to see a defensive scheme change, bringing in, Dan Quinn, former Seattle Seahawks defensive coordinator when they were like the Legion of Boom. And then in Atlanta, I mean, Atlanta wasn't that good of a defensive unit, but I mean, they did deal with a ton of defensive injuries. So, I mean, I guess maybe a defensive scheme change could help them, but at the same time, I mean, the personnel just is not going to get that much better on the defensive side of the ball. So, I mean, Dallas is going to be forced to play fast. They're going to be forced to be playing from behind a good chunk of the time. Dallas is going to have to score 30 points a game to have winning record. But I mean, that's completely realistic. And we saw the 5-game pace Stack was on last year, before the unfortunate ankle injury. Desean Watson led the league in passing yards with 4,800. And Dak was on a 16-game pace of 5,900 yards. That's over 1,100 yards more than the NFL passing leader, which is just absolutely insane. And I mean, he was not going to keep throwing for 400 yards every game, but I mean, they were playing from behind, and that's just the game script that was forced to him. And he's got freaking Amari Cooper, year 2 CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup's still there. They're going to get their tight ends are going to be back in full force. They still do have Zeke. They've got Pollard they can do creative things with. They're getting involved more in the offense. It's just that offense is going to be a top 3 unit overall. And it's going to be because of the pass game. Now, they may not have as many designed runs for Dak, but Dak is a competitor. And when he gets a chance to get out on the edge and make plays with his legs, he's going to do that. He's not going to shy away from, making big runs happen just because of his past ankle injury. I just think that's who Dak is. He's a competitor. He's not afraid to take hits on. That's just always been who he is. So I think that, if there is some concern about the ankle and the rushing upside, I mean, that is warranted. There may not be, as many designed runs for him, but I mean, he flashed his upside with his arm last year anyways. So I think that concern, shouldn't be as weighed as heavily as maybe some people would think. So yeah, I'm all in on the Cowboys. They're just way too talented. They play inside in a dome and have no defense. So I think it's more of the same from what we saw the first 5 games last year.
Real quick before we throw it to Kev, who do you think ends up being the starting tight end? Do you think it goes right back to Jarwin, or do you think Schultz is going to be a little more involved with how well he played last year?
I think it goes back to Jarwin, assuming he's all systems go. I mean, he is the better pass catcher. Schultz was just a byproduct of how good that offense was in the system that, I mean, you got to focus on the other 3 guys first, and you have to try to stop the run too. Like, it's just a pick your poison kind of offense, really. So I think Schultz was more of a byproduct of how good everybody else around him was, and I think Jarwin's definitely the better pass catcher.
Kev, the KC stack, and is it viable? Can you do it?
I mean, you can do it, but being able to pull it off is a whole other. Did you guys hear that?
Yeah.
What the hell was that? What? That scared the shit out of me. I was like, little kids laughing or something?
You need to go check on something?
What the hell was that?
I don't know, man, but that's that's like one of like scary movies, like little kids and like old grandmothers. Like I can't do it, man. That'll get me to close my eyes faster than anything.
Oh my God. I was going to talk and all of a sudden that fucking threw me off. All right. Let me get back. Hopefully it doesn't do that again. I don't know what the hell that was. All right. What was I talking about?
Chiefs.
All right. Yeah, but that stack is so tough to pull off because you have Kelsey and Tyreek who are both going in the first round. Kelsey's going 7.3, Tyreek's going 9.3, and then you have Mahomes who's going 34.2, QB1, and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who now for the brand is really starting to move up draft boards and now going at 21.9 or RB15. So you really your best bet is if you're picking kind of in that later part of the first round where you can pick Kelsey or Tyreek. More than likely it's going to be Tyreek, and then run it back in the second round with Mahomes. But to really fill out the stack, you're going to have to go and because Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably going to be off the board by the time you pick in the third. So you're going to have to go to the secondary pieces of this offense and, pick your poison, whether it's McCole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle, or Cornell Powell, unless they bring in another wide receiver, which is still possible. I think they are the dark horse for Julio Jones because Brett Veach is a madman and will do whatever he can to make it work. But regardless of that, I don't mind going with some of these secondary guys, taking shots on McCole Hardman, who's wide receiver 50. You got Demarcus Robinson. I don't really care for that, but I do think McCole Hardman, at least in best ball, does make a little bit more sense because of that spiked weeks that he's going to have. But he's, in redraft, it's a little bit different where, I don't know if you're ever going to be able to predict the weeks that he's going to go off. But I think in best ball, I do think McCole Hardman makes some sense. And he's going wide receiver 50, 112.2. So I don't mind that, in the secondary stack. But the problem with going that is with the Chiefs is mainly the fact that it just hit me again. What just happened is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to essentially punt. Like you're not going to get a top running back more than likely. I guess you could get one possibly in the third round, depending on how it falls. But the way the running backs are falling off the draft board, you're really investing some heavy capital into this stack to make it work. And while, this Chiefs offense is one of the top 5 best offenses in all of football, I would personally, I would want some exposure to this team, but I think that you might be better suited going with a stack that's going a little bit later and maybe trying to get some of these other pieces, maybe a secondary piece of this team, or going, in the later rounds with a Hardman and a Byron Pringle or Cornell Powell or something like that. To getting more of a secondary stack to this instead of going with the full all. Because if you're doing that, you're going all in, and you're going to have to hope to hit on your other pieces.
Kev, obviously you're probably going to have to make that choice between Tyreek and Kelce. You're probably going to switch those up if you're, looking to get that stack. But, who would you prefer? Just, who do you think you'll have more exposure to if that's a stack that you were going after? Would you lean Tyreek or would you lean Kelce there?
I would probably lean Tyreek just because of his absolute boom upside that he has, where Kelce's Kelce will have those weeks where he's going to give you 30, but Tyreek has those weeks where he's going to give you 35 to 40, and you'll have multiple of those, where he will outright win you a week or multiple weeks. And so just that massive ceiling he has, and nothing's really changed with this offense. Like I said, they lost Sammy Watkins, so nothing has really changed whether they had Sammy Watkins or he was there or he wasn't, because Sammy Watkins was always hurt. Yeah, that's embarrassing. Could you imagine being a truther of Sammy Watkins? Couldn't be me. But anyways, and it's a sad thing too, is we could have had Allen Robinson with the money we paid Sammy Watkins, and we paid Sammy Watkins. Like, that is the one downfall of Brett Veach, so I'll never get over. But regardless of that, I don't think you have to, because I think you can go get Darren Waller in the second round. Like, Darren Waller is putting up very similar numbers to Travis Kelce. They're right there neck and neck, and one's going, a little bit later than what Kelce is. So if you're wanting to go, if you're going a different round of a stack, but you want to get, I like going Tyreek early. I don't mind going late first round and getting Tyreek, and then in the second going and getting Darren Waller and being good at tight end, because Darren Waller is going to get 150 targets this year because the Raiders still have fucking nobody to throw the ball to outside of Bryan Edwards. But, but right now, that's the Raiders team is set up that way, is where Darren Waller is going to see 150 targets again this year. And so if I can get a little bit of a discount, I'd probably prefer going Darren Waller than going Travis Kelce, with the top 6 pick.
That makes sense. Let's go ahead and move things to our mid-price stacks. If you're rocking with us and you're not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We would greatly appreciate it. Hit that thumbs up as well. Give us a little like. Make Kev feel good, in case his house ends up haunted after the night.
I don't know what that was.
Let's be honest. Kev definitely plays with children's dolls, and that was one that just randomly went off in the corner. He's not used to being down in the living room. But anyway, Matty, let's throw it to you again. Looking at our mid-price stacks, the way we kind of broke this one down is guys who are going in rounds 5 to 9, give or take, over on Underdog ADP.
Yeah. So, especially with dude, with how spread out some of these stacks are, I think there's one stack that they're all kind of condensed into the same range, and it kind of allows you to actually stack them up if you're looking for a mid-range stack, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson, he's undervalued. He's currently going at 55 ADP, so you're looking at the 5th to 6th round. And he was QB2 off the board last year. And so now you're looking at QB4. He's going just ahead of Dak. And I think, people were taking him in the second round because of his rushing upside and, how good that Ravens offense was in 2019, which Lamar Jackson had an unreal season in 2019. He led everybody in fantasy points that year, which it's not out of the realm of possibility that happens again. And if he does that, I mean, he ran for 1,000 yards last year and had kind of a mediocre season. So, I mean, it wasn't his legs that were the issue. It was more so the passing yards and the passing touchdowns that kind of dipped from 2019. So if he's going to get back into that top QB overall range, it's going to be because of the passing production. And this is finally, he's finally got some talented weapons to throw the ball to. And it's not just a bunch of tight ends or wide receivers that are in tight end bodies like freaking Miles Boykin. So, I love the fact that, that they drafted Rashad Bateman, bringing in Sammy Watkins. Watkins is not going to be some high volume guy. And that's not really what the Ravens offense is. He's going to be a guy who catches a couple passes a game, but he's explosive enough still that, he's somebody you have to respect on the defensive side of the ball. They still have Hollywood Brown who can take the top off. And I know, Kev, we talked about Hollywood Brown a million times on each DFS pod. How he was due because he was getting so much, predictive stat production, like he was getting all the air yards and was not catching any of his targets. So, I mean, he's due for a bounce back year and he has a low ADP. I think he's going around 100. And you've got, like I said, Bateman and Watkins are there to round out the wide receivers. And then Mark Andrews is being drafted, pretty low for his standards at tight end position as well. He's currently 5th tight end off the board behind Kyle Pitts, which is kind of funny, at 61 ADP. So, I mean, that's another guy you're looking at mid-range value for, an offense that legit could be a top 3 offense in the NFL. I'm in on the Baltimore Ravens.
I like one of the early reports I saw too. Again, it's super early, but following the rookie mini camps was with Bateman working on the outside, and that's one thing I'm not favorable on. But what that does is that pushes Marquise Brown into the slot. So I think that is a much better spot for him. And as far as Lamar as a passer, the middle of the field is where he's much more comfortable, more accurate. So I think Marquise Brown is going to be going very undervalued, and he's someone who I'm definitely going to be on in all formats this year, whether going out and trying to buy him cheap in Dynasty, getting him in redraft, and obviously in best ball as well. Kev, what you have? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's a good point too. And if that happens, I mean, think about like the kind of high-low combos you can run. Marquise Brown, going over the top a little bit across the middle of the field. And you got Mark Andrews underneath across the middle of the field. And I just think that's schematically that makes a ton of sense. And then the other 2 receiver spots, you're replacing Des Bryant and Willie Snead with Rashad Bateman and Sammy Watkins. So it's definitely an upgrade all around for the Ravens offense. And I'm back in on them again this year.
I am super curious to see what it meant whenever the quote came out that, we're going to see this Ravens offense doing things they've never done before. It's like, what does that mean? Lamar Jackson's going to have more than 500 pass attempts? What is that? But, there should be some coaches on the hot seat with how that offense has performed. So hopefully we do get, some pass attempts at Dobbins. Hopefully he gets involved in the passing game. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a huge part with Lamar and taking off and everything, but I am also buying back in on this Ravens offense, and I think they are going to be undervalued. Kev, what do you have for the mid-price stacks? Who do you like here? And shout out to Mr. Clever Lang coming through with that $4.99 super chat. The thing that I don't like about the news coming out with Bateman is I really hope they just don't plug him on the outside. I hope they move him around because that's something that he showed that he can do at Minnesota. But I also have some of these same concerns, CJ.
Yeah, and I think the Ravens offense is going to be, it's not going to be something where it's not going to be like a Chiefs offense where multiple guys are going to explode on a weekly basis. It's going to be one guy explodes one week, different guy explodes the next week. And so like you're stacking them for that purpose, that you're just trying to pair Lamar, with whichever guy goes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, whether it's Mark Andrews or whether Hollywood Brown catches 3 passes for 125 yards and 2 scores. You're just trying to capture that high upside guy that's going with him. That's really the purpose of the Ravens stack. As opposed to the Chiefs or the Cowboys stack, you're kind of banking on multiple guys getting there on a weekly basis because of that, how much draft capital you have to invest in them.
So for mine, I went with a good old Philadelphia Eagles stack and Jalen Hurts, who continues to hover right around that QB8, QB9. We saw last year the short sample size that we did, but how explosive he could be as a runner. I think he is somebody that is primed to be this year's Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson, however you want to word it. I think he has the ability and the upside to get you 800 rushing yards. And I also think that, with the way the rest of the stack sets up, like you're not really investing a heavy draft capital into it either, because as things currently stand, Jalen Hurts is 79.4 QB8. Devontae Smith is 80.7 or wide receiver 37. You have Jalen Reagar, who's 127.3, wide receiver 55. And then Dallas Goedert, who's 83.7 or tight end 7. You're not really investing a ton in it to make this stack work. And I think this offense does take a pretty big step forward this year in 2021. And I like Devontae Smith. I think he is going to be the alpha in this offense. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 out of the gate. But I also think Jalen Reagar, who a lot of people are down on and basically write off because it is a what have you done for me lately type of league, and because he struggled last year, people are going to be off of him and not want any part of that, and I think that's a big mistake. You have to remember, like when they got no preseason, he got hurt early on in the process, and then when he came back, that offense was dog shit. That team was dog shit, right? And so, like, I think people are writing Jalen Reagar off a little bit too soon. Do I think he's going to all of a sudden be some top 5 wide receiver? No, but I think he can be a very strong wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type in the NFL. And I think now with adding Devontae or Dallas Goedert, I think this offense can take a pretty big step forward this year. The offensive line is going to be back healthy. I think all those things considered, I think the Eagles stack, I think makes a lot of sense. And one, with getting Jalen Hurts with that Konami code upside, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think now with some more, really, young nucleus in terms of this offense, I think this offense is going to be much better than what we saw last year. And so I like getting my hands on this offense because it's not one you're going to have to invest heavy draft capital in. If you want to go the running back, you could with Miles Sanders, but he's not even being drafted that high compared to where he was going last year at RB 18, 31.5. And with all the running backs they have there, I don't think Miles Sanders is going to move up that high. He's another running back that kind of scorned people a little bit. He didn't give you the output you were looking for as much last year. And so I don't think Miles Sanders really moves up all that much either. And he's kind of in a value spot where he's going right now too. So I just like this entire Eagles offense to take a big step forward this year. And let's face it, getting to play in the NFC East where all of those teams outside of Washington football team, they have the only defense at all, right? The Giants defense is suspect. The Cowboys have no defense. You're going to see a lot of shootouts between these teams, and so I like where this team is at, and I like this offense quite a bit.
For sure, Matty. I know you brought up the Seahawks pre-chat, so I'll let you take a look at that and kind of gather your thoughts, and I'll talk about my mid stack here real quick, and then we'll get to Walito's question. But the team that I'm stacking in these mid rounds is going to be the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, Matty, you were talking about how bad the Cowboys defense was and them not being able to do too much because of how bad it was. Well, the same thing applies here to the Bengals. I know they kind of switched out edge defenders with Lawson and Trey. They are going to have some guys coming back in the secondary who were injured. I know they brought in Mike Hilton, but it's still not going to be a great defense by any means. Nothing that's going to keep them with the ability to control the clock or do anything like that. But you're looking at Joe Burrow going at QB9 with an ADP of 92. Obviously, Joe Mixon, he doesn't fit into the 5 to 9 round range here. But so you're going to have to reach on him a little bit. And this is so crazy to say out loud just with how thirsty it is with running backs. But he is RB12 and carries an ADP of 15. RB12, ADP of 15. That is just how ridiculous the running back thirst is this year. And then I was a little surprised to see how far Ja'Marr Chase has moved up. He's kind of on that 4-5 turn. He's wide receiver 20 with an ADP of 48. Kev, you thought I was getting a little spicy. I think on the ranking show we did for the TFA pod, I think I had him at like maybe 22. So he's already surpassing that in ADP. And then, I know Walito is going to have something to say about Tyler Boyd, but for best ball purposes, give me T. Higgins. Whenever we're going with stacks here, anyway, I'm not necessarily interested in Tyler Boyd in terms of, stacking these guys in best ball, but T. Higgins, wide receiver 26 with an ADP of 61. So I think we just see, we saw a little bit of a down year last year in terms of their offensive pace and their passing volume. I think we kind of see that tick back up to where it was 2 years ago. And again, they're not going to have the defense to be able to control games. They have the 8th most difficult schedule in terms of their opponents' projected win totals. So there's just going to be plenty of passing volume to go around no matter what. And then we've gotten the reports with Mixon as far as that goes, because that's been something that has been kind of disappointing and kind of holding back his true ceiling as a fantasy asset. We had the report come out from their OC earlier in the offseason saying they don't want Mixon to leave the field. And then we got the report that came out, the blurb, which I'm here for all the offseason OTA training camp blurbs. And the one that came out that said Mixon was actually working at a couple wide receiver spots. So if he gets involved, I think Burrow has a chance to finish within the top 5, top 6 quarterbacks if everything falls into place for him. And then obviously he's going to bring that offense along with him.
I actually like that stack quite a bit. I think it's one you could do a lot with. I don't mind going Tyler Boyd, to be honest with you, because I feel like the Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins kind of cancel each other out. I think you pick one or the other, I guess. Let me put it that way. I would much rather have Tyler Boyd over Ja'Marr Chase, Tyler Boyd. I think it would be a really good stack with Joe Burrow, because Tyler Boyd's not going anywhere, and Tyler Boyd is one of the most undervalued wide receivers in all of football. He is one of the better slot wide receivers in the league. And I think this is an offense that they're going to run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets. They don't have a tight end. And so I think all of these guys are going to be able to get a ton of targets here in this offense. And so I really don't mind that at all. I like the Burrow. If you want to go Ja'Marr Chase, you'd rather go T. Higgins is fine. But then running it with Tyler Boyd as well, I think it's a really nice stack.
That was going to be my answer too. Is I think that offense is going to have enough volume that it's not that you're really going to be fine with any of them. They led the league in pass attempts last year, didn't they? Or they were near the top if they weren't at the top.
I know their pace of play was down compared to 2 years ago, and maybe their passing rate wasn't as high. I'm not sure where they fell in terms of just pure attempts, but Tyler Boyd has an ADP of 79.5, and I think that puts him at wide receiver 36 or 37, and he's currently sandwiched right in between Juju, who's going at 78.4, and Devonta Smith, who's going at 80.7. Look at this. Debro coming through.
Okay, there it is. With Burrow. Yeah, I knew because they were once Burrow got hurt, they definitely dropped. But with Burrow, they were definitely near the top. Shout out Debro. Always coming in clutch.
Absolutely.
He's just a walking encyclopedia of stats. I mean, you can literally ask him anything and he'll know it off the top of his head. It's insane.
It's his life. Like literally,
it is his life.
He's literally always on Twitter. You could always like 100%.
Like you could ask him anything about Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston right now, and he would tell you, well, the day they were born.
Taysom Hill worshiper, and he's going to tell you how good Taysom Hill is, and Jameis Winston. He's wrong. It's Jameis season. Let's know this, right? But one thing I do like about D-Bro, he's always awake. So like when I'm up at 2 a.m. and I want to talk football with somebody, I just like, hey man, let's go ahead and just, and he's always awake. So he's like 7-Eleven.
Matty, did you have any thoughts on a Seahawk stack? Like I said, I know you kind of brought that up in passing pre-show while Lito was asking about the stack here.
Yeah, so I was looking at them to be in consideration for the stack that I wanted to talk about as my top 4 round stack, because I mean it's an obvious one, right? It's easy. It's Russ, it's DK, and it's Lockett, and you don't really have to do anything else outside of that. You're going to get the boom when Russ goes off. You're going to get the boom game from the wide receiver, whether it's DK, Lockett, or both of them. It doesn't really matter because you're going to have both. The issue I have with Seattle is Russ lit the world on fire the first half of last year. I mean, I don't think he had a single game under 25 fantasy points in that first half last year. But after that, those first 8 weeks, completely different story. And I mean, the Seahawks, they struggled to score, and they were not scoring points against bad defenses. And it was a big concern. And I think the biggest part of that is the O-line issues that they have, and they didn't really do anything to address that. And I mean, we saw this play out in the Super Bowl too, right? Like, no matter how good your quarterback is, he can only run for his life for so long before the pass rush gets to him, and it's just going to throw a wrench into them consistently scoring points. So yes, I do think that there are going to be some big weeks out of the Seahawks. I do have slight concerns, but I mean, it is Russell Wilson too. If they can figure out how to protect him and keep him in the pocket clean a little bit more, then yes, we can absolutely see a repeat of those first 8 weeks that he had over the course of the entire season. And if that happens, he's a league winner. Because I mean, he was just on a absolutely torrid pace to start the year. Let Russ cook was the talk of the town, and he was definitely cooking. So,
well, I found it interesting too with them. It was over the offseason. I can't remember whether it was Tyler Lockett or DK, but I think it was Tyler Lockett who talked about them and said that teams just figured them out in the second half because they just kept doing the same thing over and over again, and they had no underneath threat, right? So nobody, and that's why they drafted Dwayne Eskridge, was to fill that role, to be that slot, short, intermediate route guy. And so, like, I know, like, it's like Dynasty and everywhere else, like, nobody really likes Dwayne Eskridge right now. But, like, in terms of, like, best ball, like, I think he's a really, really sneaky guy to take later in draft, because I think he could have a bigger role in this offense. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did air it out more than, the second half of last season. Like, we saw Russ pissed off this offseason, and, I don't think they're going to want to do this again, where they continue to go down this road where they've been doing. So Dwayne Eskridge could end up being a much bigger piece of this offense than I think people expect. I think he could be the guy who's that short, intermediate route, who, much like Doug Baldwin in his career, whenever he was with Seattle, I think he can be used very similarly. And so I know for me, like, I think Dwayne Eskridge is one of those guys that people should be really looking at and taking late in best ball drafts, because he's free.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen Russ target these third string wide receivers, no matter who they are, right? Like, David Moore was getting work. Who was it? Freddie Swain, the guy last year that came in and got some work. Like, he scored some touchdowns. Third string tight ends get in on the action occasionally. So yeah. I mean, if you're stacking up Russ and you can get both DK or Lockett, or if you don't get one of those two, I think Eskridge makes a ton of sense, because I mean, he's a second round pick and he should be on the field day one.
And I think Chris Carson also represents, with how, like I said, talking about Mixon and his ADP and where he's sitting. Chris Carson, I think, is a nice value in terms of the running back position, currently going at RB19 at the end of the third. So I really like that price for him, all things considered. Let's go ahead and round this out. Talk about some of these cheap stacks. I know it was kind of difficult and a little gross with some of these ones here toward the end of underdog ADP. So, Kev, why don't you jump in first? Talk about the cheap stack that caught your eye.
I absolutely love this fucking stack, though, because I love this offense this year, and they are being egregiously priced right now, and where they're being taken and valued. Like, there's the only player in this entire offense that's going in the top 100 is Jonathan Taylor, who's going at 6'7", RB6. Other than that, every one of them are going later. Michael Pittman's going 105.6, wide receiver 6. You have Paris Campbell, who's going 155.4, T.Y. Hilton, 135.6, and Carson Wentz, who's 154.3, quarterback 22. I love if you go quarterback early and if you go with an early stack, like I am not going to come back and get a quarterback who's going, in the 7th, 8th round or something like that. Wait later. Like you took that high draft capital pick, that high quarterback. If you're going Lamar or you're going Patrick Mahomes or Kyler Murray or whoever, you're going early. There's no sense whatsoever to come back and take another quarterback within the first 10 rounds. Wait as long as you can. And this is one of those stacks you can easily do that with Carson Wentz. Quarterback 22 right now. I think Carson Wentz bounces back in a big way. We're getting a lot of positive reports about Carson Wentz. Out of the OTA, stuff like that. I know it's early, but I really think that his relationship with Frank Reich and this offense, and again, they're another team that's been tied, or I don't know if they're tied to them more than other people are tying them to, but to Julio Jones, and because they're another team that definitely has the draft capital, or not the draft capital, the salary cap space right now without having to do anything to be able to make that trade work. I just don't know if that's the type of trade I could see them doing. In terms of Chris Bauer, because they are much more of a team that builds within. They don't add a lot of free agents and stuff like that. They build through the draft. And so, but with Carson Wentz, quarterback 22, Michael Pittman, I think Michael Pittman could be a wide receiver 2 this year. Like I love Michael Pittman this year, and a wide receiver 46. And then you have Paris Campbell, who I think, again, we saw it last year. We keep waiting. Paris, stay healthy. Can you stay healthy for us? Could you just stay healthy for us? Because the dude is absolutely dynamic. And if he can stay healthy, wide receiver, he's going 155 on the board. He's going on like wide receiver 60, right? Like he's absolutely free, and I absolutely love him as well in this offense. I think these two wide receivers take over as the 1 and 2 in this offense, and where T.Y. Hilton factors in as the wide receiver 3. They don't have anybody of value at tight end either. Mo Alley Cox, they brought him back, but they still have this solid offensive line. They signed Eric Fisher, formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs, and so. Listen, I think this offense is going to be a lot of fun this year. And I think, with Carson Wentz, a revived Carson Wentz, this is one of the easiest stacks to me to take late because of how cheap it is. And I think the upside that this stack represents. Because it would not shock me one bit if Carson Wentz was a top 10 quarterback this year. We've seen him do it in the past, and I really would not be surprised whatsoever if he bounces back to that this year. And then, like I said, if he gets there, he's going to be bringing some wide receivers with him. And so that's why I have no problem with taking, especially at their price, Michael Pittman or Paris Campbell, or you can easily grab both.
Yeah, and T.Y. Hilton had the quote of he was excited to get back to some more of the deep passes this year with Wentz joining. At that price, it really doesn't matter. I just feel like for Carson Wentz's sake, that wide receiver group is pretty thin, so I feel like if one of those guys goes down, that could get a little ugly, a little quick. But
listen, if there's a quarterback that's used to playing with shitty wide receivers, it is Carson Wentz, because he hasn't really been dealt when he was at Philly a lot of great wide receivers, right? I mean, he made Greg Ward a thing, he made Travis Fulgham a thing. So like they still have Zach Pascal who's there, but that's why I think where a lot of people fill in the box of Julio Jones, that they are a team that has the cap space to be able to do it, and maybe the need to be able to, because they're kind of in this window right now with this defense that they have that is one of the best in the league, to go along with this offense with trading with Carson Wentz. They have the cap space to make it work, and so you add Julio Jones into the mix here. I think then this offense would be. I think Carson, if they added Julio Jones, I think Carson Wentz goes up into probably the top 15 of quarterbacks off the board.
I just want to say that was very disrespectful of you to leave out Mac Hollins' name whenever you're rattling off some of those other receivers.
JJ Arcega-Whiteside or Nelson Aguilar.
Yikes! Some bad drafting there. Whenever you look at the what they've done at receiver, but Matty, who do you like for some cheaper stacks here toward the end of the underdog drafts?
Yeah, my stack is going to be the Miami Dolphins. The most expensive piece of that offense is currently Will Fuller, and he is going. Miles Gaskin's going around 50 ADP, but he's not a part of the passing attack. Will Fuller's going around 77 ADP, so you're looking at 8th, 9th round-ish. And then Waddle's going to 98 ADP, Devontae Parker 116, Gesicki 119, and then Tua's at 142. And Tua's, I mean, this is going to be Tua's second year coming off of that hip injury, the nasty injury he had in college. He's going to be more full strength than he was last year. He's got a better understanding of the offense. He's not going to be threatened to be benched every game when he's doing bad, to the point where they're like, okay, if we're losing, we're going to put Fitzpatrick in. They got him some help at the wide receiver position, bringing in Will Fuller. They already had Devontae Parker, who was a main staple of the offense, Gesicki. And then they paired up Tua with one of his college teammates in Jalen Waddle. So there's definitely some familiarity there between those two. And we know the game-breaking speed Waddle has. We know the game-breaking speed Will Fuller has. That offense has all of a sudden become a very explosive offense just from a couple of additions that they've made. And when Tua was at quarterback last year, the weeks that he was in, the Dolphins ranked 14th in situation-neutral pass rate. So they were hovering around the 58% pass rate mark. So that's, that for a team that was playing from mainly in front while Tua was in, with the exception of 2 or 3 games and we even saw, we saw a 48 attempt game and a 58 attempt game out of Tua in games that they were trailing. The games that they were winning handily, he only threw, low 20s. So there was definitely concern about that. But, I think that, again, coming into a second-year offense, they don't really have running backs that they just want to take over the game. I think it's going to be into his hands. They spent heavy draft capital into it despite the injury. They're bringing in wide receivers to put around him. They believe in him. So it's, if they're not going to let Tua sling the rock and control this offense, then why did you draft him and make all these offensive upgrades in the first place? So, and I know some people will have the counter argument. Well, the Dolphins defense, was one of the top units in the league last year. And yes, they very well could do that again. But I've learned that defenses are one of the things that are the least predictive from year over year, especially at defending, certain aspects of a game, right? Like, what was it, 3 years ago? We were like, oh, Tampa Bay has the worst defense in the NFL. Just play running backs against them every single game. And then the next year, they're the number 1 rush defense and allowing like 10 yards on 18 carries to McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. And you're just like, what? So it's just one of those things, like I try not to put too much eggs in one basket, when figuring out which defenses are going to remain really, really good from last year to this year. So I won't let that take me off too. I just think, he's got a lot of arrows pointing up for him, and they're a cheap offense, a talented offense and a cheap one. So yeah, I love the Dolphins.
That was one that caught my eye as well, Matty. One that definitely doesn't feel as gross or as thin as this one, but I'm going to stay in the AFC East for mine. I'm going to go with the Jets here. Try to paint inside the lines that Kev gave us. Outside of Michael Carter, rookie running back, who, for the brand I'm all about, he's going in the mid-7th. Outside of that, everybody is going outside of the 10th round. After Michael Carter, Corey Davis comes in the mid-9th at 115. And then you have Elijah Moore at the end of the 11th, Denzel Mims in the early 12th, and then Zach Wilson in the mid-14th. I mean, I think people are looking at the staff that came over from San Francisco, and they're trying to apply, what they did in San Francisco to this team. But you're not going to be able to have that same offensive and defensive team philosophy here. Even though the defensive line looks really good on paper with some of the additions they made, bring in Carl Lawson, Sheldon Rankins to go along with Q Williams. I mean, I still think they have some questions at linebacker. They definitely have questions at corner. Their safeties are solid. But other than that, like, you're not going to be able to control, as much as I like Michael Carter, you're not going to be able to absolutely control games like Sam Fran did with that run game, even though they have Elijah Vera Tucker to go next to Mekhi Becton. They're just not going to be able to do that. But I do like some of the pieces. And again, in best ball, it wouldn't surprise me to see some of these guys go off. Matty, like you were saying, the point with some of these mid stacks and some of these late stacks is you're not going to get some of these guys who are going off, multiple guys from the same team. But I think you can still snag some of these guys. And I think that, guys like Denzel Mims, who can take the top off, Elijah Moore, who's an absolute terror in space. And then we saw Corey Davis, finally start to produce toward the end of his time in Tennessee. So this is just one that's super cheap, and you're definitely not going to have to pay, obviously, any kind of insane prices. And to go back to my point with Chris Carson being a nice value as far as running backs go, I think Michael Carter is a really nice value if you're looking for your RB4 or so in the mid seventh, a guy you can get who should be able to handle 60-ish percent of the touches there, because I don't think that there's anybody else in that backfield who can really push him. So as long as he can get the playbook and he's not making mistakes or anything like that, I think he ends up being the lead back, and being able to get the lead back in the mid seventh round is something that I will be all about, especially this year with how crazy it is with running backs.
Speaking of the rookie quarterbacks that bringing Zach Wilson, but the other rookie quarterbacks, I think one approach is if you go quarterback early, let's say you go with a Dak Stack or Josh Allen or whomever early in the draft. I think taking one of these quarterbacks like Justin Fields or not Trevor Lawrence, but Trey Lance or Justin Fields, who likely aren't going to start the year, but there's a really good chance that they are going to at some point in this year. That you're not going to need them early on to be able to produce, and I think taking them, as your quarterback too, I think makes a lot of sense because of that upside that they can provide on the ground in those offenses that they're going to be in, especially Trey Lance in San Francisco, because of that offense and how dynamic that offense is, and with Kyle Shanahan, and so I don't mind doing that as taking your second quarterback. A guy that you're not really worried about early on. You drafted that quarterback to start, but the upside of that other quarterback you're going to draft, I think, because those guys' upside, Trey Lance and Justin Fields, both for this year, at least later on in the season, is as high as any quarterback because of the situations that they're in.
I think that's a great point, Kev. And that's definitely something I've talked about too, or we have as a group, is, when you plant your flag on a unique position like quarterback or tight end early in the draft, you're really banking on that guy smashing for a good majority of the year. And if he doesn't get there, you're likely toast anyways, because you wasted a very high draft capital on a position that you don't need to spend high draft capital on most of the time. So like if Mahomes is going to pay off, let's say you take Mahomes first, as your top QB, if he's going to pay off, the odds that your second QB are in your starting lineup because he outscored Mahomes are very minimal if Mahomes is paying off. Now, if Mahomes is not paying off and you need a guy like a QB you needed to draft in the seventh round, then you shouldn't have drafted Mahomes on that team anyways, because, he's being outscored and you wasted a third round pick on a quarterback or a second round pick on a quarterback. So I think that strategy makes a ton of sense, trying to get a high upside guy who may not see the field for the first month of the year, but has a chance to step in and really, really have success. So yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense.
I'm actually in a best ball 10 right now, because up until I think Kev, earlier this week, you sent me the tweet that Underdog opened up in PA. But actually, that's exactly what I did. I took Kyler early, and then I got Trey Lance at the beginning of the 14th. So that's exactly what I did.
Yeah,
And
I like that.
Yeah, I saw him sitting there, and I was like, there was a team that had 3 quarterbacks, and I think everybody else had 2 except me. So it's going to start getting pretty thin here. And I was looking through, and I saw Trey Lance, and I just said, "Yep, let's go ahead and do that." So we do have one more question in here. It comes from our guy Walito. Any interest in a Bill stack? He's talking about getting Diggs and Allen early, but then who do you get there between Beasley and Manny, and then Jabba Dabba is all about that Bills stack life. So any either of you have any interest or any thoughts on a Bill stack? And and then another question, I guess, is there at either of those or any of those running backs that you're interested in at all for Buffalo?
Well, I think on a couple levels, I think that team is a team that, in terms of, because Gabriel Davis, I think is another place you could go in terms of completing that stack. Dawson Knox, if he can take another step forward this year as the tight end in that offense, I think there's different ways you can go. Like really outside of Diggs and Allen, like it's a relatively cheaper stack that you can get to, and pair with Josh Allen. And I don't, honestly, I don't really mind taking a shot on Zach Moss either if you wanted to. I think he's going in like the 7th, 8th, 9th round range, somewhere right in there. I'd have to look it up on Underdog. And like, I don't hate that. Like, I think he has upside. Like, listen, Devin Singletary's a bum, okay? And I don't know if Zach Moss is any better. I know towards the end of the year before he got hurt, they were trying to give him more opportunities, and he was starting to take over the backfield a little bit. Then he got hurt. And so I think the problem with Zach Moss is going to be that Josh Allen. Yeah. But in terms of best ball, we don't really care, right? Because you're likely taking him as your RB4. You're not starting him every week, and you're hoping that he can get you. If he can get you 4 or 5 RB2 weeks, throughout the season and become a option for you, then you'll take that all day in that spot. And I think that he can definitely get there. So I don't mind Zach Moss, and taking him at his current ADP. Now, if he gets higher, because I've heard people, hype him up a little bit as well. If he happens to get higher and higher, then I'd probably be out. But at where he's currently going, I don't mind it. And then, if you want to go a Manny Sanders or a Gabe Davis, I think both of those are also options in a Bill stack.
Yeah, I think the Bills are definitely in play. I'm on the same page as you guys. I think the ADPs are depressed because, like you just said, Kev, Josh Allen, he steals a lot of the touchdown equity with his legs and doesn't always, attach it to somebody else on the offense. So that's definitely a concern for the lesser guys, considering how much love Stephon Diggs gets from Josh Allen. But they run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. So, all those guys are going to be on the field at the same time. Davis, Manny Sanders, Beasley, and Diggs. So there's definitely a ton of opportunity for them to go around. And, they ran the 3 rushing plays in that playoff game last year in the first half or something ridiculous. And, they've showed that they will just let Josh Allen go out there and chuck it. So, I think that makes a ton of sense to stack up the Bills too, especially with how cheap those secondary pieces are, and kind of the same point we've made on other offenses too, like the Ravens. If you just get the one guy that, like, you pick Josh Allen and Diggs, maybe Diggs goes for 100 yards, but Gabe Davis catches 2 long touchdowns. You get that exposure to an offense that's going to score a lot of points, and I think that's the name of the game in best ball.
RB35 for Zach Moss, by the way, ADP of 95.
Yeah. So then, I don't mind that one bit. I did want to ask really quick because this kind of came to mind and I was thinking about it. How would you feel about a Tennessee Titans stack though? Because AJ Brown, you're going to get him in the second. You probably get him in the second round, right? And as long as they don't add another wide receiver there, like I absolutely love AJ Brown this year. I think he can be the wide receiver 1 overall this year. I think he can absolutely smash, one of the most efficient wide receivers. Now you give him 140 targets. But then Ryan Tannehill is not being drafted early whatsoever. You could get him. And if they can maintain the same efficiency as they have the last couple of years, I don't mind that as kind of a, if you want to take Ryan Tannehill as your second quarterback off the board here in this offense, it's not something you want as early, but I think somebody, then maybe you stack him with Anthony Berkshire, who's also pretty much free at this point, who's going to be the tight end one in this offense, or if you wanted to go Josh Reynolds. But I just think it's kind of a sneaky stack. A sneaky stack.
A stinky stack? Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Well, I just don't know if you're going to be able to grab both of those guys with Henry. Obviously, he's going at 3.9. Him and Saquon Barkley kind of seem to be the two that are split at the third spot. Barkley going at 3.5. And then A.J. Brown, I think, is just going to continue to creep up. He's already going at 16.5. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to grab both of those guys unless, you get into a draft with, me and you, Kev, we're just absolutely hating on Derrick Henry. Shout out to the comment section. And he kind of slips to that, RB6 kind of spot. I just don't know if you're going to be able to grab both of those guys.
If I did it, I would not take Derrick Henry as part of the stack. It would just be A.J. Brown, and then I would take Ryan Tannehill, and then probably like Anthony Berkshire or something like that, or Josh Reynolds or whatever.
Yeah, you have to take Josh Reynolds. Yeah. I mean, they literally have nobody else. Like, it's what is it? Nick Westbrook Ikine, or however you say his name, is their third string wide receiver. He's going to be starting.
Fitzpatrick.
Their fourth round
pick.
Rookie Fitzpatrick they brought in.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, they do run a lot of two wide receiver sets, so it's going to be Reynolds and A.J. Brown to start the year most likely. But I mean, I put me in the camp that I think Corey Davis is better than people give him credit for. And also, I think the loss of Jonnu Smith is big too. Jonnu is such a key piece of that offense, even though he didn't put up weekly numbers, monster numbers. But I mean, he is a legit mismatch in any facet of the game, and you have to account for him. So I think losing Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith and replacing them with a bunch of lesser named guys is really going to put a hit on that efficiency that we've seen over the last 2 years. I think if you like Tennessee, you just draft A.J. Brown and log out and leave it at that. At least that's how I'm going to approach it.
I don't hate that. It's just one thing I have found when drafting in terms of trying to create a stack is either you're really trying to force it, right? Because you almost have to reach a little bit, because if you're going to complete a stack, like, you have to get those guys as quickly as you can. And in terms of the early stacks or even the mid stacks, right? Like, you can't mess around like, oh, I'm going to wait for this guy to get here. Now I would say, instead of trying to force it, you kind of let it play out as you go. And okay, I got this guy here. Let's say you take A.J. Brown or Stephon Diggs, for example, and you're sitting there in the fourth round and Josh Allen's on the board. Okay, let's go ahead and take Josh Allen. You start that stack or whatever. But, if you're really wanting one of these early round guys, like, you have to really force it, and it kind of puts you in a position to where you're probably foregoing some other value that's on the board to be able to complete that stack, to where some of these stacks are going to be a little bit easier to come by. Even like the Stafford one you talked about. I really like Stafford, that stack as well, because Stafford is right now being criminally undervalued, which he is every year. But I think that offense has the potential to be a top 5 offense this year with Stafford and Kupp and Woods, and then even getting like a Van Jefferson as well, or Tyler Higbee in that stack. I absolutely love that, because those guys are going pretty late as well. So it's not something you're going to have to really invest heavy draft capital in. And I really like that as well. But to go early in some of these guys, if you're going to get Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, you're really going to have to force it and maybe even get a little aggressive on them, or maybe draft them around earlier than their ADP dictates, to be able to really complete it.
Yeah.
Last one here, we'll get out of this. Walito wants to know about the Falcons stack. I think it's probably one of the ones that's the most feasible to do, just with how spread out they are. Calvin Ridley currently going at the end of the second. I think that's going to shoot up, especially as we get, once Julio gets out of there. Cav, I know you said on the rankings that if Julio gets traded, you could potentially see putting Calvin Ridley in like your top 2 or 3 wide receivers going into the year. You have Mike Davis going at the end of the 4th. And then I think what's going to end up happening is you're going to have to make the choice between Mike Davis or Kyle Pitts. Pitts is currently going at 58.1. I think with Julio out of the picture, I think we just keep seeing Pitts' ADP rise even further. And then, Matt Ryan, even though he's going to have all these weapons at his disposal, I don't think we see a bump for him. So I definitely think this is a doable stack. That defense, still not great. Going to be a bunch of shootouts playing in that division as well. So that's a stack I like. Any other thoughts on the Falcons stack or how you would approach that one?
I still like the Falcons. I don't know if I would invest in terms of a stack. Like, I like Calvin Ridley a lot, and I think that he is going to, once Julio goes, kind of the same thing where you just draft him. I don't mind Matt Ryan. I still think Matt Ryan has something left in the tank. He threw 4,600 yards, 26 touchdowns last year. That defense is still going to be trash. I can't mess with Kyle Pitts, though, at that ADP. Like, I love Kyle Pitts, but he's only going to go higher. I guarantee you he's going to go up. Like, he's not going to go down. Now, maybe the market in with everybody else, what a lot of people are going to say, maybe he drops down a little bit once we get to August, but I don't see it happening. I think people are just going to predict that once Julio leaves, that he is going to get those targets that Julio got. Who else is there? I mean, Russell Gage would be the other guy that you'd really want because Russell Gage is cheap. I like taking Russell Gage later in best ball drafts because I think that he is definitely a guy that I think that can give you some wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 type weeks. And so, but Kyle Pitts is probably going to end up going in like the high 40s, but by the time we get to August, and that's just too high for a rookie tight end that's never stepped foot on a field. I think that he can be an outlier. I really honestly do. I know a lot of people like it's cool to act like that it's ridiculous to think that Kyle Pitts could have 800 receiving yards, like it's some sort of feat, because I think that he's going to be used all over the field. I think he is never going to come off the field, which is the big difference between a lot of these tight ends. Like, most of these tight ends don't see the field that much their rookie season. A lot of these guys aren't out here playing 100% of the snaps. Kyle Pitts is going to play 100% of the snaps. He is going to get 100 to 120 targets. I would almost bet you're maybe not 120, probably 80 to 100 targets. I think you can safely count on that, right? Especially if Julio Jones is traded, because they're going to have to throw the ball somewhere. They don't have anybody else. Hayden Hurst is still there. They're going to run a ton of 12 personnel with him and Kyle Pitts on the field. And then you have Russell Gage. I mean, past that, who do they have? Christian Blake? Zacchaeus? And I mean, like, they have nobody else. You talk about a thin wide receiver room once Julio Jones is gone.
Yeah, it's Christian Balake, by the way.
I will never. Do you remember the Thursday? Was it Thanksgiving? It was Thanksgiving slate, and Julio was out. Remember? And I definitely remember on the DFS show that I was advocating for Christian Blake in that game, and he did. I think he had like double-digit fantasy points. I'm pretty sure. He worked out. He was a sub 1% play. I got crushed by Matty and Ryan. But, of course, once again, I come through with my sub 1% play of Christian Blake, and it worked out. But speaking of which, Ryan, if you're watching this, FanDuel, really? We haven't got to talk about it. He's over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the stone cold worst. Like, that's like, we hate FanDuel, okay? Happy for you that you got this opportunity and that you're doing stuff with FanDuel. If you guys haven't seen on Twitter, Ryan Williams is helping out the FanDuel team over there, creating content. But FanDuel really couldn't win with DraftKings. I don't know. I'm just saying. He says he's going to get us to play FanDuel. I can tell you it ain't going to happen with me. But, maybe Matty will come over to the dark side and play some FanDuel. But I will not. But regardless, congratulations.
Been there, done that, bought the T-shirt.
Yeah. And so I will say, hopefully, we're hoping he'll be back for the start of week 1, the NFL season, so I can tell him why he's wrong all the time. But I would be remiss not telling him congrats and love you. So
absolutely. And with that note, we are going to get out of here. We appreciate you guys jumping in. Make sure you're subscribed. Going to be doing the best ball shows a little more often. Get back on this bandwagon. The redraft content is going to start to really pump out here. Player versus player videos like we did last year. The dynasty content is not going to stop either. And we also have some Devy content coming out as well. So make sure you're keeping it tuned in here. Going to have all of your fantasy football needs. And until next time, see ya. Bye.